Hey Tate, so I wanted to give you a little bit of feedback on this. Let's watch through it really quick here.
Maybe that's all family related. Group of people that miss the same imaginary place.
So, a couple of quick notes. I think that um, overall, I think the upper body still needs more motion. I feel like even through you're getting like some breathing, but the rotation of it still feels just kind of locked in place there. Um, and so that's the biggest thing I notice. Especially you get like a little bit of movement there, but then like everything before that, his shoulders are moving, but his chest is just kind of staying in the same place. You can see that if I just draw sort of a little line around his neckline here, and as we scrub through all of this, it just always kind of stays in that same spot. And so just going in there and getting some motion on all of that with to kind of coincide with the movement of his head will just do wonders. But you have to like it has to be moving at all times at least a little bit. Now that doesn't mean it's constantly swirling around everywhere. If it goes up to a point and sort of hits that and then just kind of settles in there and then starts moving again, like. But what you don't ever want is for it to just completely flatten out and then go to somewhere else and just completely flatten out. So, um, that's my biggest note, and I think where the biggest issues are. So let's look at a couple of other little things I think we can work on to really kind of clean this up a little bit. So I think that this gesture here, let's see, this hand gesture here is actually pretty good. How he gets into that feels a little hard. So it feels like the hand comes up and then goes sort of forward there, but it sort of hits a wall on the up and then shoots forward. And so let me see if I can draw that curve. Let me just try to scrub here a little bit up. So this arc here looks pretty good, right? But I think at the arc that kind of comes up there and kind of hitches back feels kind of odd. So let's imagine that we were a little bit more around the character and looking at that hand head on. Right now, what it does is it goes straight up and then it kind of dips in and then it kind of does this gesture out, right? And so what I think you should consider doing is doing that as one sweeping arc. And maybe it comes up through here and then does that gesture out. Now, what we can do to kind of look at this, and you can see why this isn't working so well, is I'm just going to go through here frame by frame, and I'm just going to draw a dot on the tip of his finger here. If I can do this. Okay. It's pretty much the same there. So we'll get that one. So you can see that just all kind of going straight up and just sort of hitting a wall. And then this arc here, I could actually draw that arc, and it would probably be pretty decent as it goes through there. It's doing a little bit of something like this, right? So that part's pretty good, and it feels like it's got more polish. But just the way the arm comes up feels a little too stiff. And so what it feels like it's doing is it just goes straight up and then kind of does some stuff here and then does your arc. And so like thinking of that instead, maybe it does a little bit of something like this, or um, inversely, maybe it does something like this. So that just needs to be a clear arc. And you just need to kind of track that. I mean, even if it is doing what I'm doing right now, just going through and frame by frame, kind of looking at where the finger is and what arc that takes. Now, you can you can do that still yet by just using your you're not going to get point by point, but you're going to get the actual arc by using that animation curve, or what's it called, animation motion trail, or I think it's what it's animated motion trail. And so now I just want to show you that on a couple of other spots here as well, because I feel some of these head movements, and they just kind of feel like they kind of rock back and forth and hit points and change. So like if we look at the nose, like sort of what it does is it will travel to one direction and then hit a wall and just dart back. And so that's actually just going to be in the rotation of the see, just kind of hits a wall and comes back. So instead, and I know this sounds crazy that this is the level of polish that I think it needs. Instead, really think of how the nose turns and comes back this way. Because usually that like rotate hits a wall and comes back means you're just rotating on one axis. So I guess in this it's probably like the y axis. But just that little bit of rotation will also end up being like a little bit of a bobble on the top of the head, and a little bit of sort of a up and down motion as well. That just causes all those combinations to get that swooping arc. So the nose is something that a lot of people usually use to track that. And so if we go out here a little bit toward the end, this is where I see it the most. You get this really hard head gesture. Let's see right here.
Same imaginary place.
Right there, same imaginary place. So he turns his head, he's kind of rocking it back and forth, and he turns his head and like hits a wall right there and then just comes straight up. And so let's see if I could actually draw that arc on the nose. I believe what it does is it starts there. Okay. It goes straight to there. Right, and then goes straight up. And so that is making almost a right angle there, right? And so that feels like it hits a wall and goes up. Right? And so what I think you need to do there is just really think in these really small arcs. That instead of making that arc, what the nose needs to do is maybe dip here a little bit and come back up to here. Yeah, so just that small tweak and stuff, and then when it gets to this point here, it can't just stop there either. It will kind of dip down, get up here to this point, and do like a very small turn there and come back. Now I know this again. This feels like it's nitpicking details, but it really is this level of polish that I put into every animation I do. I may not always track it that closely, but I should. Um, and so that's kind of what I would say is definitely necessary with the head and the arms. Before you do any of that, though, you need to add this. You need to add a little bit of motion in upper body here, and at least a little bit in the lower body here. Nothing that is visible should ever be completely still, or nothing that is visible should ever have anything in the graph editor that is just completely flat. So just go in there and put a little bit in there, and I think you may have some motion in there in the graph editor. It just I'm not seeing it when he moves around. So let's watch that one more time.
Maybe that's all family related. Group of people that miss the same imaginary place.
Now, having said that, I actually think that your gestures and your emotions are pretty good. Um, your lip sync still needs some tightening up. It's mainly just feels like your jaw going up and down, and so it feels like it needs a little bit more in the corners of the mouth. And then your eyes just kind of feel like they're locked in the head a little bit. So really, you'll need a pass in here to make sure like he just kind of stays focused on. So like right here, see how they're just kind of like hanging out in his head as his head moves around. Just animating those really tightly to get a lot of darting in there. To get him like have him focus on something and hold it even as his head is moving. Um, and sort of dart around. Like right here, it just kind of feels like they're just drifting. So there's really small things in the face, but that's kind of the last little thing you'll go in there in the details on. Something else that's bothering me, and this is I don't know if this is in that like arm correction control or what, but this armpit just really feels like there's a like that feels a little unnatural, that curve that it's making there. And so what I would expect it to do is kind of come up here and meet, and then this to kind of come down, as sort of a separate piece. And so this kind of is doing it a little bit more too. This one looks a little bit better, but I don't know why that just feels too rounded there. So I don't. I'm not necessarily sure what that is, but you may want to play around with that just a little bit. And I guess this is part of sort of the polish of that arm arc that we were talking about at the beginning. That hand just sort of pops up there just like in the first few frames, and it does it in like 3 frames. So it just really feels like it just pops up there, and then kind of hesitates. So I think if you're gonna do that, just kind of ease it, like maybe even start the hand right here and just kind of ease it up into this pose, or start it a little earlier and I don't know. It just feels like it hits that a little hard. So I think easing it into this top position will help a little bit too to break some of that like the arm just rockets up there into the scene. Let me watch through one more time and make sure I'm not missing
Yeah,
anything.
that's all family movie. Group of people that miss the same imaginary place.
I know you kind of see it here, but he's got a little bit of an arm hitch right there. Now I don't know if that's intentional. Maybe you're wanting him to feel like he's sort of shifting his arm. If so, this is still feeling like it's a little early. Like it needs a little bit more detail into that.
People
Now,
that miss the same imaginary place.
something I do. There's actually a setting in the channel box. Hold on a second. Okay, sorry about that. I paused the video while I set this up. So when we're looking at our resolution gate, which I believe is that this one, yeah, we get this area like we can still see the objects outside of this, and sometimes that's misleading. Sometimes we see motion happening in there and don't realize that even though we see this box, we don't realize that that's going to be trimmed out, and we still think of that as part of our animation. But since that's not going to be rendered, I like to sort of make sure that I can see what it's really going to look like. And so what I usually do is I'll select the camera. It's not usually. This is actually just something I started doing recently. If you select the camera that has that resolution gate on it, and you scroll down here, it's under. I have trouble finding this. Yeah, it's under this display options. We get this gate opacity, and if we just set that up to 1, it'll be completely invisible. And so what you can also do is turn that down to black or something, just so you can see, through this window is what you're going to actually see rendering. And so that sometimes will help you make sure that you're not factoring in some of the stuff that's happening outside of screen. I say that because it feels like you're going to have some issues with how these arms are contacting on the legs here, and that maybe some of that's part of what you're doing is you don't want to get it locked in IK or something to do that. You want to leave it in FK. Well, if that's actually not visible where it's contacting, then you may not even need to worry about it. And I mean, it may even be worth pushing your camera in a little bit more just to hide that contact point, so you don't really see it sliding around. Not much, but just maybe like up to here or something. Um, so I just kind of wanted to point that out if that's something that you're like. Don't factor in anything that you're seeing outside of here. So hopefully that's helpful. Let me know if you have any more questions, and I'll be in my office all this week if you need to swing by and ask about anything. So I'll talk to you soon.